What are the best decks in Marvel Snap right now? Well, this video will reveal all, as we're looking at two different sources today to determine the best decks in Marvel Snap. We're looking at Untapped's data, which has over 1 million games recorded, and we have also Marvel Snap Zone's very popular meta report. Now, before we get onto this, I do want to mention Iron Lad, who just came out today, because he is going to be throwing a big spanner into the works that is the current meta, because this card is absolutely bonkers. You can make a pretty good case for Iron Lad slotting into a lot of the top decks at 4 energy and 6 stats. It has an ability which says, on reveal, copy the text of your deck's top card. If you hit something like a Doctor Doom, something like a Sandman, something like an Iron Man, this card is absolutely ridiculous. And I think it's so good because of its 6 stats, which is online with stuff like White Queen, which are pretty solid cards, that you can just include it in a lot of decks where it doesn't have that much synergy, and you can just play it as like a high roll play, right? And if you're not in a very good spot, you're like, well, I'm kind of losing, I can slam the Iron Lad and maybe I just win the game for free. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do with Iron Lad, which is why I wanted to take this moment to look at the meta before Iron Lad really enters it. We can see what the meta's looking like before Iron Lad and then make some predictions about what it's going to look like after Iron Lad. All right, we're going to start off with Untapped, Stature as the top deck, and we can see some agreement there because also Marvel Snap Zone have put Stature as the tier 1 deck. This is the most common list. Nebula, of course, absolutely ridiculously good, almost certainly going to be getting nerfed in the future. This one has Jeff as well. Now, a lot of people think you have to have Jeff to play this deck. You absolutely do not. People have been asking me, what's a better use of my token? Should I spend 6k on Jeff or on Iron Lad, for example? I would absolutely recommend Iron Lad over Jeff because Jeff, as good as it is a very replaceable card. Something like Nightcrawler would be an absolute great fit into this one. And I also want to mention Iron Lad. This deck is already playing Zabu. You've got the Dark Hawk Rockside Korg package, and Iron Lad just fits into that package of cards fantastically well. If your Iron Lad hits Dark Hawk or Rockside or Korg, you're pretty bloody happy. And of course, your Zabu means it's only going to cost 3. So it's quite likely that Iron Lad will slot into this deck, perhaps Polaris being the card which gets removed. I've never been a big fan of Polaris personally. Jeff also very replaceable for Iron Lad or perhaps a Nightcrawler. But both of the meta reports putting Stature as tier 1, 60% win rate on Untapped GG with an average cubes of 0.5. Pretty extraordinary. All right, we're going to now look at the other tier 1 decks according to Marvel Snap Zone. We have Serra Control in here. So many different ways you can play Serra Control. This deck also could make use of Iron Lad potentially because of the Zabu being in there. That means Iron Lad is just going to cost you 3. You could play Iron Lad into Bishop on turn 3. You could play Iron Lad onto Serra onto turn 3. So if you really high roll, it could be quite extraordinary. However, there's a lot of things which wouldn't be particularly good, right? Like the Scarlet Witch could maybe be the card which makes way for the Iron Lad. It's definitely not amazing, but even if you just play it for 6 stats, which is costing you 3 energy with Zabu, it's kind of not that bad. So I can definitely see Iron Lad making the cut here. If we look at where Serra Control is with the Untapped, they've got it in tier B, but they've got Stature all on its own. And it's definitely looking like a similar looking list as the most common one with 20,000 games. I do think that these Serra Control lists, there's lots of different ways you can go with the Bast approach, but my gut feeling is actually this kind of approach is going to be the best way, but with Iron Lads slotted in there, perhaps for the Scarlet Witch. Absorbing Man, you can obviously double up on Enchantress, on Shang-Chi, kind of an interesting card, not one I massively love the idea of. Kind of cool with Hit Monkey as well, you can double up the Hit Monkey with Zabu. Maybe I can see it, it seems like a cool list. All right, Doomwave. Now, Doomwave is all over the ladder this morning with the introduction of the Iron Lad, and I do have a video coming out later today with what I believe to be the best version of this deck. There's a lot of different ways you can go about building Doomwave. This is the one without Iron Lad. My friend Shade built this one. I actually built a deck basically card for card, exactly the same on a video that I posted on Nebula's release. There was like 2 differences here. It's a very solid deck. The other way you can go about building it is using Dark Hawk. Storm is still an option in this one. Goose should absolutely still be in this one. As I say, the deck's coming later. But with that package of Zabu, Korg, Rock Slide, Dark Hawk, and Iron Lad, it's a really solid addition to the deck. So this is definitely a very, very strong deck. And we can see that Doomwave is actually not performing as well according to the untapped data. But if you look at the most popular list with 7,200 games, it is not a particularly optimized list. There's no goose in this one. I think also it's quite a difficult deck to snap well. Like, you want to be obviously snapping when you hit the wave on 5 often. I would say this deck is better than the data would suggest because the most optimized lists are not often played. But yeah, that's the tier 1 for the for the Marvel Snap Zone meta report. And we can move on to tier 2 now in the Marvel Snap Zone meta report. And Serra Surfer comes up. If we look for Serra Surfer on here, Serra Surfer is also performing pretty well. Loads of different ways you can go about building this one. I love the Rogue in these decks. There's a lot of Dark Hawks doing the rounds right now. So I would play something quite similar to this. Rogue in for Polaris. I don't like the Nova. I don't tend to like Serra either. You guys know how I like my Silver Surfer decks with Kingpin in there. And I like the Lizard as well. So Lizard and Kingpin and then Rogue for Polaris. But yeah, it's a strong deck, and it's good to see that Silver Surfer is still performing quite well. Deathwave, which I also have a video coming in the next couple of days, is also in tier 2. We can see here on the Untapped report that Deathwave is also in a similar spot, not with the most extraordinary win rate. The most popular one actually won with Leader, which is rather interesting. It's something I've considered playing myself as well. Iron Lad, not going to be very good in this one. This deck has really good matchups into popular decks like Discard. It's very good into the Doomwave decks as well, which is so popular. So I could see that Deathwave actually could start making a bit of a comeback again. I think it's a very underrated deck. Discard doing quite well as well into tier 2. This is card for card the deck that I posted, except that I play Collector instead of Wolverine. Wolverine would definitely be my second choice though. We can see Discard's got a 53% win rate, which is pretty solid. Being able to win the Storm lane so consistently with Morbius and Dracula is a real strength of this one. The Untapped most popular deck though, not optimized with no Nebula. Nebula is just so good in this deck. It really boggles the mind how this card got printed in the current state. Devil Dinosaur, Dark Hawk being quite popular here. Lockjaw also being up here. Galactus in tier 2 in the Untapped report. Patriot looking like it's making a comeback, and then we'll look at the tier 3 decks later. Let's look at then the rest of the decks on Untapped, which are performing super well. We've got a deck very high up here, which I have been seeing doing the rounds a little bit. Not the highest win rate, but quite a high average cube rate, and this is a double She-Hulk deck. The idea being that you play She-Hulk, you play Moon Girl on turn 4, skip 5, and then you She-Hulk two She-Hulks on turn 6 alongside some other stuff, maybe like a Hitmonkey or She-Hulks are going to cost 1, so you go She-Hulk, Hitmonkey, Mysterio for a big amount of points. This is definitely a deck that I'm going to try out in the next day or two, performing super well. Serra Darkhawk, this is just an alternative way of playing Serra Control, this one with Rockside and Darkhawk. This is the kind of build where you can absolutely slot Iron Lad into. We've got Lockjaw also performing quite well here, which got to mention. Quite a few ways you can go about building it. Personally, I don't like the Sunspot. I don't like the M'Baku. I prefer the Nightcrawler kind of version, which is similar to the one here we saw on Marvel Snap Zone. You could maybe make a case for Nebula as well in these ones, but the thing I like about Nightcrawler is you can just move Nightcrawler out of the Lockjaw lane, or you can put Nightcrawler into the Lockjaw lane. This deck actually got better with the Lockjaw nerf because you're able to get big stats into your Lockjaw lane on turn 6 if needed. Like you can play Wasp and Giganto, and the Giganto would actually stick into the Lockjaw lane. Just some kind of like mid-range Nebula deck. Nebula is just performing quite well. This one, a lockdown deck with Storm, Spider-Man, Professor X, and Daredevil. Not too surprised to see a deck like this performing quite well, but it's really cool to see the Guardians of the Galaxy actually being reasonably good options. There's a She-Naught deck, which is kind of similar to the double She-Hulk deck, but just slightly worse. You can play Magic on 5, and then play the Infinite and some She-Hulks on turn number 6. Galactus doing quite well. Very, very popular, of course, but doing pretty well. Hela actually looking not so bad. Hela also an interesting deck to experiment with Iron Lad, so I'm going to be checking that out. Thanos looking quite solid as well, and Patriot not looking too bad. Electro Ramp still pretty solid at 52% win rate. I think it's an underrated deck. Marvel Snap Zone put it in tier 3, which I'm a little bit surprised by. We'll take a quick look at the tier 3 decks in Marvel Snap Zone. They've got Cerebro 2 in here. I don't think this deserves tier 3. I think it's pretty bad. I played it myself. It's okay. It's fine for tier 3. Electro Ramp should be tier 2 in my opinion. I think this is still a solid deck. Bounce is really struggling against the amount of waves right now. Thanos not looking too hot. Hell actually making it into tier 3. Nice to see. And again, I think Iron Lad makes it a lot better. And there's also some tier 4 decks here as well. Sandman seems like a very weird choice for this deck, but I'm intrigued nonetheless. All right, that's a quick look at the meta snapshot. I think overall, we can safely say that Stature's the best deck. I think the Serra Control's looking solid. Death Wave and Doom Wave decks are looking good. Serra Control, Silver Surfer decks looking like a bit of an outsider, as well as the She-Hulk Moon Girl decks are looking like the other kind of strong contenders in this meta. Discard looking solid as well. Just like some more stuff like Lockjaw, Dark Hawk decks also looking like they could be coming back into the mix. And I think Sandman is still one to keep an eye on. I do think it's a very underrated deck in general. Thank you so much for watching this meta report recap video. I hope you enjoyed it. Give the video a like. And yeah, let's wait and see what Iron Lad holds for the meta game, because I think things are about to change up quite significantly over the next couple of days, especially with that OTA change coming in on Thursday. It's possible we could even see decks like Stature getting nerfed. We'll have to wait and see. See you soon. Bye.